Hello, everybody. It is Tuesday, June 22nd, 2021. It's about 11:30 on the Pacific Coast. This is the language workstream for the Inclusive Naming Initiative. My name is Celeste Horgan. I will be the host for today. The agenda is in the chat. Please put your name in the agenda if you are attending. That would be very, very helpful. The other thing to do is to take a quick review of the meeting agenda. Sorry, I'm retrieving a link from the chat that I dropped in. First order of business. Carla so very kindly recorded our thoughts and put together a formal statement of work or scope of work for this work stream based on our discussions over the past couple of meetings. You can find the link for that under status updates in the agenda with a note of please review what Carla has written by end of day tomorrow, so that we can get this merged in. And just the only purpose this serves of merging this in is to record this for ourselves in a way that's kind of publicly available. So that is the only real reoccurring status update. We have a number of items on the open discussion in the agenda.
Celeste, I don't see the agenda in the chat. Did you add a link?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Let me drop it in there again for you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Agenda is in the chat. So we have 3 items on like the main agenda for today. One is sort of starting the task of writing recommendations. The second is last time we met, we talked about wanting to reach out to different underrepresented minority organizations. And there are 2 topics there that we need to talk about. One is we talked about putting together a pitch deck to start reaching out to these organizations like Black in Tech to ask for help. And the second is understanding which organizations we'd like to reach out to. Where would we like to start? Also, Lex has a note as well.
I have a third question. I don't know, I can't remember if we resolved it. We had talked about the possibility of offering some kind of compensation to people for doing this work. Do we actually, do we want to do this? And is this something that we can actually come up with money for or something?
Yeah, I don't think we resolved that either. And I think that's a good, you know what, let me rearrange the agenda slightly. And let's kind of divide our meeting today, if I can remember how to paste things. Goodness. There we go. And to kind of the remaining discussion around reaching out to underrepresented minority groups and organizations, working with them. And then if we get to it, we'll get to recommendation writing and Lex's question. If not, we'll put those for next week. Does that sound like a plan to everybody? Going once.
Yeah.
Going twice.
Okay. Sounds good.
Cool. So I think I want to start with Carla's question around the possibility of offering compensation, which, because you're right, I think that's our big unsettled business from the last meeting. My main questions are going to be how much, who, yeah, like how do we want to structure that, I guess.
How do you do this? Yeah. I know
Yeah.
my experience with this comes from, in social media, people who are out there educating expect some kind of compensation. They're not doing it for free. It's not the free work that we all deserve to get. It is work of value that costs people in one way or another to give.
Yeah. Again, I'm thinking about this from the perspective of like, I'm also apologizing because I cannot put anything into words today. I'm thinking about this from the perspective of, I guess, like running an organization that has a budget attached to it.
Yeah.
And like fundamentally, when you're running this kind of the organization that this will become, when the budget is very dependent on who makes donations to this kind of thing and why. And so the question that I'm coming up with is, again, if we're going to disperse funds, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry that my voice is breaking up. If we're going to disperse funds, it needs to be in a fairly structured manner.
I'm just wondering, this is Monica, if there is some kind of precedent for this with other Linux Foundation groups that we can, because I feel like I just don't have my bearings at all. How would you go? I just have no idea. Is there a precedent that anyone's aware of?
I'm sorry, what's the precedent you're looking for? I'm sorry, missing that.
Well, for, let's say in some other, assuming we become a Linux Foundation group that is, within that group, that framework, is there a precedent for paying for certain kinds of contributions to that effort? That's the question. Because I just have no idea.
So the Linux Foundation as a whole tries to keep its like full-time staffing to a minimum. I can tell you that much.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of what any nonprofit does, and the Linux Foundation is at its core a nonprofit and runs as such. So the Linux Foundation will very often hire contractors for various things. That's level number one. And for a very long time, I was a contractor with the Linux Foundation, and at least partially because of my work with I was taken full time. So full disclosure there. So that's kind of option number one, and that's why I'm sort of looking for like, what does the structure of this look like? Like, does it become contractors or consultants that we pay?
I think it's more, the model is more when you, sorry to interrupt, I'm a terrible interrupter. The model is more like when you hire an academic expert to give you an opinion, to give you some of their expertise from their field. The idea that's becoming prevalent now, and I think for really good reasons, is that the people who are educating about racial issues are sharing their expertise, and they don't want to do it for free. They would like to be fairly compensated, because not because they want the money so much, but because it needs to be recognized as a formal, valuable thing.
Yeah, and I'm not inherently opposed. I'm just thinking like, again, I'm trying to think like three steps ahead in terms of like, if and when we go and ask for money, like the more traditionally structured that request looks like, the easier it's going to be for the mechanisms at play to approve that kind of request. The other aspect of this is that we then also need to build in that kind of funding request into the memberships that we solicit from the companies that we approach for doing those things. Now, I actually think that, and to give a bit of background to everybody on the call, the INI is currently in the process of becoming a legal entity under the Linux Foundation. And a part of what that typically means is that it solicits membership dues from companies who are involved. However, I actually don't think this is a bad, it's not a bad thing that we're effectively going to have to build in this kind of ask into the money that we gather from people, because there are a lot of companies with very deep pockets, frankly, who are looking to do more of this work, but they're not really sure how to contribute. And this is actually a pretty reasonable way for them to do so. But we need to think about that. Sorry, Kartik, you've had your hand up forever. Thank you so much for your patience.
Sure, no worries. So I was just going to ask about that because one of our thread in our last meeting is like, what is the status of the governing board that we are intended to create? And the other thread is like, would that create bias if we pay people and if we like actually pay for only certain amount of people? And this is like, people are going to come and apply. Yes, that is different, but still like, what if they end up in if we are not diverse enough to pay, right? If the volunteers are not diverse enough to come and work and get paid, would that cause kind of a difference of our principle? So
Yeah.
you answered it.
Yeah.
For the first question, you said like we are kind of going into the as a legal like we are going under Linux Foundation. That makes sense, and I totally get that, and it is good because there are, as you said, like there are a lot of technology giants who is actually investing with full-time employees there. They could kind of outsource this to this particular INI organization, and they can actually use and consume the recommendations and the outcomes and the results from the INI itself. So that is a good thing. And one thing I'm kind of still worried is the paying for the contractors and consultants. We cannot go and ask an individual, and even when we are actually opening up a form for filling it up for a voluntary basis and get paid, we don't want to pay for one single group. It should be as much diverse as possible.
Yeah.
So that is something I mean, I'm glad that we're going to pay for people, pay for contractors, hire contractors, and to work on. But I don't want to deviate from our principle of inclusive and diversity.
Yeah. I think you're bringing up a really interesting something that's been on my mind too, which is how do you ensure diversity as we legalize? And I think insofar as like paying consultants and contractors, I think it would be selecting contractors who are from diverse backgrounds and choosing to pay those people.
That is also a problem, right? Because you cannot decline just the fact, say, this is just for the sake of the conversation. If there are like applications from 5 white men, and you just accept 1 white man and decline 4 other rest of the applicants just because they are white. That is also something we shouldn't be doing. We must not be doing that as well. Just because we don't get a volunteership or a paid volunteership from some other HUGs, we cannot decline the rest of the 4 applications as well. So that is where the problem comes.
Yeah, I mean, and I think if my understanding of like US employment law is correct, I think it's also illegal in most places to decline somebody based on race.
Okay.
So we just can't. Is what it comes down to. But I think the question that's at the root of all of this is, what specific work would we be trying to pay somebody for?
Yeah, like how we gonna structure that to make sure as much as we are still sitting with our principle of more inclusive and more diverse people that are partnering or volunteering or getting employed by others.
My concern also is, if we're paying for experts coming in as opposed to looking for volunteers from various organizations, if we feel that we need a diverse, that our set has to be diverse, are we, for everything that we do, are we paying for, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 people, which can get expensive? Or not, or it ends up just paying them token amounts and they feel that, insulted rather than feeling like they were volunteering to help out with creating standards. Like, I'm not sure how things go with standards bodies, and maybe some of you are familiar with it, but are those people paid, or are you paying people to come in with specific backgrounds to do specific tasks?
Well, I can answer the question from standards organizations. Those are standard organizations are, usually the ones that actually develop the main deliverables of standards. They're usually people who are employed full-time by companies, but they volunteer for the standards organization. And I think we're unlikely to get, we might be able to get, very few standards organizations have, there are a few, but not many of them have full-time staff.
Yeah.
Most of them outsource their, just like a lot of projects have Linux Foundation manage them. So.
Yeah, so I wasn't saying we should get people from standards organizations, but saying, are we modeling ourselves after standards organization? Because I can tell you I am paid full-time by BMC and, can volunteer here. And, people at BMC were, encouraged to volunteer for the I&I organization. And probably others of you are coming from organizations like that. So are we thinking that we're modeling like that? And what is it that we're trying to pay for?
Exactly.
I think,
sorry.
Oh, I just have a suggested, I'd like to just revisit what problem we're trying to solve here. Because I understood the original problem we were trying to solve is how do we get feedback and input and validation from historically underrepresented groups. And it's not clear to me, but I'm open to being persuaded otherwise. It's not clear to me why paying a consultant is going to give us greater, more valid input on how a historically underrepresented group feels about, our work product than, reaching out to other nonprofits that are supposed to represent the voices of historically underrepresented groups.
No, it's a good point. Paying doesn't ensure quality or dedication or anything. It's just this is a model that people are using. We could ask for volunteers and have a diverse group. Like I'm part of a group in my company. I don't contribute to making the decisions. I'm there to facilitate because I'm a terminologist, but it's a very diverse representation and people volunteer their time to make decisions about terms. That works really well. But this is within one company.
Yeah, and
I was
people are getting paid for that effort, right?
That's right. Yeah, and recognized.
I was thinking when I say like reach out to organizations, I was thinking like, for example, reaching out to Lesbians Who Code. That's a nonprofit organization, and they can help, give us feedback on, some of our language choices, and other organizations that actually, they're nonprofits that specifically represent the voices of historically underrepresented groups, whether in tech or not tech focused. So I just want to clarify, it's not just reaching out to for-profit organizations.
I think maybe a partial answer to Joanna's question from this perspective, which is that because one of the things we talked about in the past is how willing certain groups are. So I'm thinking two different, the volunteer external organizations that you're describing, and there's also the employee resource group affinity groups that many of us have in our organizations. And both of those, particularly the second group, are people who are doing additional emotional labor on top of emotional labor that they have to do and so forth. So I'm always wary of only asking that group or making that the only group we rely upon, and also types of groups of people. I think the outside organizations is another approach that I like because of its mission is to serve a certain purpose, and we're coming to it and saying, within your mission, can you look at this? And I would think that would be something that they would want to do. To me, though, the advantage of the paying for expertise is not that it's an either or, but it's a yes and that it does a couple of things. It gives us a third angle that is somewhat more subjective in the sense of, like I think was Carla was saying about hiring an academic or something to give you an opinion, to give a proper analysis, or even an industry analyst does that as well. And everybody kind of looks at them as having a somewhat neutral standpoint from what they bring in. And then it also just shows our commitment to the first two groups, particularly the affinity groups, and says, hey, we're not just doing this on your labor, your free labor. We are actually getting these subject matter experts as well to add in other voices in. So you don't have to feel like we're only relying upon you. And once again, this is all needing you folks to step up to make it happen. So that was kind of my thought about what the value we also get from it is that it's a little performative, but performative in a positive way, I think.
I'm just going to continue one thing. Probably this is totally my opinion. Don't take me wrong if comes in a wrong way. Probably we are trying to boil the ocean too quick. How like we just go and approach some some of the groups to ask them to volunteer, say like lesbians who code, and then we'll go to them and then we'll say like, hey, we are doing something like this. If you want to contribute, it would be great to see your contribution, and we are in the process of making it like more formalized, and you will get recognized in the community, in the open source community, something, because we need to give them something. So the recognition is the only thing we can give back to them at this moment. So like that, all of us, like, we can take this back to the groups that we know in the community, and then we can ask them, and then we can ask them to contribute. So until like we are, as Celeste is working on this, until we are getting legally bound, like into the Linux Foundation, we'll do this. And when it is done, then we will look into this contributions, and then we can actually collate that contribution, and we go to a cohort of people where that includes more diverse people, because what is inclusive language for you might not be inclusive language for me in my demography, in my geographical region. So we'll sort of something we'll figure out at that point in time. Might be we might need to pay, like get the payment for them, like the compensation for them, and we create a cohort of people which includes all ethnicities, all HUGs, all people from all the demographics and everything, and then we can kind of go over that contributions, and if there is anything missed, we can add it to that. If there is anything kind of needs to be removed, we can discuss on that. Does that make any sense? So this is totally my opinion. I guess we are trying to boil the ocean too quick by giving the compensation, by getting into the compensation topic.
That's kind of my attitude towards it too right now. I'd like to make the ask and see who we can get from a volunteer stance. And I have a feeling we'll see what we're going to see. And either people are going to volunteer and step up to the plate, or they're not, and then we're going to have to solve the problem some other way.
Exactly, because sorry, it doesn't mean to interrupt, but at this point, we don't know whom we want to pay. We want either we want to pay for contribution, or do we want to pay for reviewing? We haven't solved that problem yet. So from my stance, I would honestly pay for reviewing rather than the contribution. And the contribution should come from the volunteering perspective, and that should be like, if I am from my heart, I'm willing to make the code inclusive, I should be contributing. That is like part of my like what do you say, like, so like how this is a core value for any organization, any company. So that comes out of me by natural perspective, and then I'll say like, okay, I'm contributing this. So for example, abort is something like I don't want to see that in the code. That makes me mentally stressed, so I don't want to see that. I'm just giving some example. I'm just playing. I don't know, but so I'll contribute it there, and I'll say like maybe I don't want to use abort in the code. I want to use something like say stop. Like I don't want to use the kill command in the code. I want to say like stop execution or something like that. So I'll contribute, and then once we have the contribution, we will go to we will think about like getting reviewed from the paid reviewers, or if we are not getting enough volunteership. And then we will think about like, okay, we need to get compensated for the people who are coming and contributing towards the terminologies, towards the INI too as well. I'm just reiterating that I think like we are boiling the ocean too quick with the compensation topic.
I'd like to propose another model that I think might be more successful. I think it's a lot to ask. So even in reaching out to other nonprofit organizations that represent historically underrepresented groups, I mean, certainly I think it makes sense to form a liaison relationship with them. Kartik, on your point about recognition, you know, they could be listed liaisons and supporters on the INI website. You know, I think that's all very healthy. But I don't think we necessarily are going to expect them to proactively contribute and attend all our meetings. I think what we might do is ask them, you know, when we need specific feedback, we go to them and say, hey, we have a draft of, our replacement terms, and we'd like to get your input, on these 10 terms that relate to your community. Could we have a conversation with you, or could you, provide some feedback by email, rather than expecting them to attend all our meetings and proactively contribute. I mean, if they do, that's fantastic. We're not going to say no to that, but I don't think we need to demand that level of participation in order to just make sure that we're getting input from those historically underrepresented groups.
I'm
Sure.
going to answer this in two
And they
parts.
also want to submit terms without attending, and if there are ways they can submit terms, that's great too.
I'm going to answer Joanna's question in two parts. As you said, like, yes, we cannot demand them, but say, for example, if we go and approach lesbians who code, we are trying to make their world more inclusive as well. It's like something we are giving back to them when they are actually willing to participate, and we are not expecting them to participate in all the meetings. This can be asynchronous, like how we sent out an email to fill up the like whatever the terminologies that people are thinking that are offensive in the Excel sheet. So it's going to be something like asynchronous. We're going to like ask them, okay, just keep appending to this particular sheet, particular Excel document. And then once we can actually have a soft threshold, soft cutoff date as well. And then we say, like, after like 2 months of period, so we will come back to you and we will discuss with other folks who are like more knowledgeable in this domain, and then say, like, okay, this is something we should consider. This is something like it is not offensive in this context, because, for example, master is in not in all the context master is offensive, and we are not trying to rewrite the English terminologies. Master is no going to get away, like, we are not going to get away from master as a English word. But what we don't want to do is, like, we don't want to give the implicit meaning of master means it's actually used in the context of master slavery, right? So that is what my thought is, like. So we can ask them, and the second thing is, like, that's what we don't have the answer so far, whether we will get their volunteership or not. That is an answer we don't have so far. We are assuming that they will not volunteer. So why don't we approach the groups and get the answer first? Like, are they willing to volunteer and like contribute or not? And then we can jump on. So that is the thing, like I was trying to say, like, we don't have an answer. We are assuming, and we are like trying to like proceed further with an assumption that no.
I agree. And, when you brought up the point about I don't remember who it was, you brought up the point about like social media and getting paid for it. I think of that as more in, are we asking people to publicize things? Are we asking people to give talks at conferences or places to do that? And that, will come down the road, when we're in that situation.
I'm sorry, I didn't get that correct. Can you please come again?
Someone had brought up the point before, and I don't remember. I'd have to look and see. Someone had mentioned that, in social media, and, this is true in all fields, if you do something professionally, you should be paid for it. But, I think it depends on what are we asking people to do? Are we asking people to contribute a few terms, look at some terms and give their opinion? Are we asking them to give a presentation, teach a course, etc.? And if you're asking them to, and they're not part of the group, to give presentations and teach courses and that's really key courses, maybe even if you're part of a group, that's when it comes to, yes, these are people you're asking for their expertise and you want to pay them for it. But so, I think we're far away from that point.
Yeah, I was gonna say that. So when we are expecting people to present and teach course, that means like they are attested in a way, like INI is attesting folks that they are kind of certified in inclusive terminologies, and they are teaching this course. So something we can, that is a good thing, like we can look further down the road, like probably like far from what we are now. What we are asking now is like contribute towards creating a list of terminologies that are kind of feeling offensive from your perspective. So from my perspective, I have like 10 different words that I felt offensive. And from person B's perspective, the person would have felt like 10 other different terminologies that felt offensive. So what we are trying to do is like, we are trying to collate all of those terminologies from all the different diverse people and then put it in a single place. And then, so the first part is like, we need to figure out whether we can get that list of terminologies from the like every single diverse personalities in the world. If that is not happening, then we will bring up the conversation again of how we can compensate people so that that could motivate to contribute the offensive terminologies. If we are getting the people contributing towards the offensive terminologies without looking forward for a compensation, then we will create a cohort of people who are expertised in this DEI world and inclusive terminology, and then we will review it, and then we will get them paid, we will get them compensated. So this is what I was trying. If I am too confusing, like, please let me know. I'll try to be slow and reiterate that.
No, I think that makes sense to me. And what would be very nice to get out of this call today, I think, is that a decision that we're comfortable with? Like, let's pursue kind of a set of liaison relationships and what's available to us in our companies right now. And potentially pursue paid review in the future. Is that a decision we're all comfortable with?
That sounds good. I'm sorry that I feel like I derailed your call with the questions.
No,
Celeste.
it's okay. It's
But
okay.
I was just really curious about it, and I think that we can probably start with volunteers, but that we should be prepared in case we go to people and they say, well, we're the experts, where's the compensation?
Okay. Just by way of gathering consensus, if this sounds like a good idea to you, either a visual emoji or like an actual thumbs up. Okay, I'm thinking that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We've got majority, so okay. Thank you so much for that. That bounces me up a question to which organizations do we want to approach? Before Monica drops, she mentions that the employee resource groups of Microsoft are available for this as required. Are there any specific organizations we'd actually like to start forming that relationship with?
I guess the other immediate thing that we want to do is like list down all the community groups, like what are all the available community groups that we can approach and ask for a liaison partnership, probably.
Yeah, I think that's an approach. That's kind of what I was looking for when I said who else can we
Right.
I just didn't want to. I didn't want to
Yeah.
like drill down, but one that's come up before is Black and Tag.
Like I don't think this is something anyone can come right now. We can actually kind of keep it appending asynchronously or on a Slack, and then we can look down the list.
Could we maybe start a spreadsheet that everyone can add to? I mean, I've got a few, but I don't feel like I need to take up meeting time just listing them.
I think that's an awesome idea. So I'm going to put a to-do that the community groups part of this discussion bumps up to the next meeting and add a spreadsheet so that people can fill that out. Which leads us to the third question that I had on the agenda around all of this, which is if we're going to approach organizations, particularly if we don't know them very well, either a pitch deck or kind of like a one-liner is probably going to be useful by way of introduction, saying like, this is the kind of work we're doing, this is why we're doing it. Would anybody like to spearhead this? If not, then I can talk to the marketing folks.
I can do it.
Spearhead it, but I'll be part of it. Sorry,
No, I didn't.
No,
mean to
totally.
Sorry.
No, if you want to.
No, I thought like I can do a draft of this in Google Deck, Google Slides, and I can share it across, and then we can.
Yeah, I was gonna say, do you want to maybe, you know what, Kartik, start a draft, but DM me before you do, because the marketing team, the marketing work streams actually put together a really helpful like one pager on the initiative that I think it's going to be taking that and boiling it down even further.
Okay, yeah, makes sense.
So yeah, I think that'd be super helpful. There's also a slide deck. So again, talk to me before you run
Sure.
out.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I like to work asynchronously.
Yeah.
So if we do something on that and then like share it on the Slack, then when we are coming up for a meeting, next meeting, like we don't need to spend too much of time. So
yeah, I think maybe let's see if we can have it ready for approval by next meeting,
sure.
which is 2 weeks. So I think it'll be totally fine.
Yeah.
So the last thing I wanted to talk about today, and I don't know if we've got enough time to do it. What do you think, Larry? Should we leave this to the next meeting?
Go for it. At least we can get a preliminary.
Yeah. Okay.
thought.
Okay. I'm going to go for it. Thanks, Larry. So something that Larry and I wanted to do while all this is happening simultaneously is start on our recommendation writing. So a couple of weeks ago, we put together kind of the short list of things that we wanted to take a look at. Per Julian, we now have a recommendation template that we can follow. And these are consensus-based recommendations that we've consolidated this initial list down to. Apologies, words. What I think would be helpful for this group is if maybe we do the first recommendation as a group, we write it together. And then once we kind of have a sense of how we like to write these recommendations, then we can go through the rest of the list and assign them to individuals to write. Does that seem reasonable?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so how would we like to decide on the first recommendation to tackle as a group? Larry suggested in our lead sync last week that the first thing we should do is actually rank by severity. And then let's look at what we think the most severe recommendation to address is and go from there.
I think everybody's tackled the same 4 terms as their first terms.
Yeah,
Right?
and I
Master,
think
slave,
we've already,
blacklist, whitelist.
yeah, and I think we've already like the group, or we already technically have recommendations for those
Yeah.
four. So I wonder if it's actually a good idea to tackle something else. So okay, we've got master.
One thing I wanted to bring up, I'm not sure what the group feels like about that, but what about adding domain or some kind of context information? Because as we were going through our terms internally, we really ran into a number of issues because the replacement terms in different contexts, and especially in different domains, are going to be different.
Yeah.
Block list and deny list, those are perfectly fine equivalents. It's just they're going to be in different contexts, correct? And I don't know how deep we want to go into that, but at least the indication of the high level domain, and for the context, maybe a sample sentence. I don't know. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that sounds good. Sounds
I
like
like mentioning the domain because there's always going to be exceptions and
yeah.
contexts in which a recommendation doesn't work.
Yeah, like for us, master and slave, just in the industrial automation domain, we have 5 distinct meanings that we are pursuing different equivalents for and working with different standards organizations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And some of them, of course, are going to be easier than others, and we might not need to specify. But like one of the things we were also discussing not long ago, I don't think I see it here. Like
This is
bullet
kind of the short list.
that wouldn't even work for like secure and safe. We couldn't even figure out that this wasn't an issue a term that doesn't appear anywhere other than in general language in metaphorical speech in some blog post. And without having the domain, it's pretty much impossible for some of those terms to come up with the accurate equivalent.
So that's actually something that a part of the reason that I wanted to do the first writing exercise together is I
Okay.
have a feeling we're going to go through the process, attempt to write a recommendation, and then realize that we want to include more or less information in than our template specifies. In short, I'm anticipating the template might have to change.
Okay.
But I think we sort of need to just choose a candidate and then set a time to go through the exercise of writing and talking about it. And what I really personally want to do is a board, but I have a feeling that's a very, very difficult one.
Well, there's nothing wrong with starting with the difficult one. Sometimes you can learn a lot by tackling the difficult thing
You know,
first.
that's very true, Carla. How about lazy consensus on
Yeah, I think that's a good one. Someone even mentioned it earlier, just as an example.
Yeah.
It's kind of in front of people's minds.
Okay, so let's go for it.
Yep.
Okay, so one last question. We have a minute left to go, and I apologize for keeping everybody. Would we like to set a separate working session, and I'll send out a doodle for that, just so we have something to talk about at the next meeting?
I would like that. I think if we have some concentrated time and maybe an hour.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Like, honestly, this is going to take us a bit of time.
Yes,
Okay,
yes, at
so-
least an hour. I think that's good.
Okay, I'm gonna send out a doodle to the channel, and I'll send it to the mailing list as well. So hopefully it will. I'm gonna send it to the general mailing list just because I'm gonna try and pull some people back. Okay, I will do that then. Thank you so much for your time, everybody. We are at time for our new 45-minute meeting, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.
Thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
Celeste. You too.
Bye.
Thanks.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.